If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you lose on earth will be lost in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, Not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, his Lord ordered him to be sold, together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, Have patience with me, I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the Lord of that slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him by the throat, he said, Pay what you owe. Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you. But he refused, and then he went and threw him into prison until he would pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed. And they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. Then his lord summoned him and said to him, You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave, as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay his entire debt. So my heavenly Father will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart.
Will you join me in prayer? Gracious and holy and loving God, may our words and our thoughts and our reflections be a blessing to you this day and always. Amen. When I was in seminary, one of my best friends and I got in this wild, kind of unexplainable fight. We had been incredibly close before he had even come out to me. When he went on his date with his first date with a boy, he brought me back a present from Chinatown. And I don't exactly know how it started, but we ended up going months without speaking to each other. And it wasn't like other schools, the grad school and seminary. It's incredibly personal. It's about your faith and what you believe and how to live in community together. And you couldn't escape each other. It was a small one building. We'd see each other in the halls. We had the same friends. And unkind words were spoken. And I'm certain none of them were spoken by me. Until one day, on Strove Tuesday, so years ago, last week, we were the only 2 people walking in a hallway about to pass each other, and he says, Hi, Leanne. And I was like, you haven't spoken to me in months, you just get to say hi and pretend everything's okay. And we sat down the next day, which was Ash Wednesday, and we talked through what happened. And it wasn't really about anything that had happened between us. It was all of these things that had happened in us. that made being in any kind of friendship impossible. Like we were crashing into each other. And so we talked and we cried and we laughed, and then we went shopping for blue jeans. And I probably learned more in those 3 years of seminary about what it means to live in community and how to handle conflict than I did my entire life before that. My guess is most people don't like conflict. We avoid it given any opportunity to do so. We pretend that our feelings aren't hurt, and we just try to breathe through it or push it down, which usually pushing down until it gets really piled up and everything blows up and you look like the first debtor who is pushed down so much that it built up so much that he is physically, literally, maybe metaphorically choking the life out of another. As children, we focus often on the one who needs to apologize, say you're sorry, and then we go back to the way things had been. Sometimes they're just words that are said as we learn to practice apologizing. And sometimes no one feels better when it's all over. We're told old cliches like forgive and forget. And we're taught to let it go and move on. We're taught that forgiveness is supposed to be a reset, to go back to the way things were before. But it's not terribly easy to forget. So we end up pretending, and this is cheap forgiveness, with no real accountability, no learning or consequences. Forgiveness should be unconditional, but maybe reconciliation ought not to be. And the only way that we ever find ourselves in a situation where we will never need to seek forgiveness or to forgive another person is by never risking your heart, your emotions, yourself with other people. Because to love and to care for someone else risks being hurt. Whether it is by a significant other, by your child, by a friend, maybe even by someone in your church. Because to be church is to be community, to be part of community, to live as community with other people in all of their beauty and uniqueness and their imperfections and their flaws. Jesus understood this. Jesus understood what it is to live together, to be in community together, to work through the past with all its difficulties and disagreements that we are inevitably going to have because we're just people doing the best we can in any given moment. And some days, the best that we can give isn't always that great. Jesus teaches them that there is an increased level of accountability and responsibility. So, if you do me wrong, it would be great if we could work it out ourselves between us. And if we can't, someone else comes in. And we try to work it out together. And if we can't, we bring the whole community in. And this does a couple of things for us. One, if I am the offended, and it turns out I'm full of crap, and it's all just my stuff inside of me and not really anything you did, somebody comes along and is like, Leanne, you're full of crap. And hopefully that community comes and rallies around and makes sure that I get the support or the process that I need to not have those things triggering me in the same way. Or if it turns out you have offended me, And that other person who has offended me is in fact abusive, because statistics say that you or someone you know has been, is, or will be in an abusive relationship. Jesus is showing an increased invitation of community accountability and an increased distance between the abuser and the abused. Safety first, friends. Now, okay. Now we'll get there. We'll leave that. If they won't take accountability or change or apologize or ask for forgiveness, won't make amends or educate themselves, if they won't repent and turn back to the tenets of the community centered on the teachings of Jesus, it says to treat them like you would a tax collector and a Gentile. And it sounds really terrible, a tax collector and a Gentile. Until you remember that those are the people that Jesus has been inviting to follow him. We treat them with the opportunity to follow Christ anew. It is an invitation, a re-invitation to turn back to Christ, to live in a community of empathy and love and compassion and generosity and justice. It does not say that there are not consequences. It might be that the invitation to a Christ-centered community is really, you need to be in a Christ-centered community somewhere else for the good of the person that you have hurt. But it doesn't mean you are outside of the love of God. Some people will choose not to accept that invitation. You will not be reconciled to everyone you seek forgiveness, you seek to forgive or forgiveness from. Which I guess brings us to the question of what is the point of forgiveness? Is the point reconciliation? Is the point that everything should go back to the way things had been before? Can you forgive someone who doesn't ask for forgiveness and doesn't receive it or chooses not to receive it? Google told me that the opposite of forgiveness is mercilessness or punishment or vengeance. And if that's true, it's no wonder these are the things that Jesus was teaching against. He was teaching a way of living opposite of those. They say those who seek revenge ought to dig 2 graves. And I wonder if in part it's because you lose a piece of yourself, a sense of who you are, when you focus on that little piece of bitterness, and then you feed it until it grows and grows and consumes all of you. And then it starts to ooze out into your other relationships, damaging even the people that you love the most. There are physical and psychological consequences of unforgiveness. There's the increased stress that might keep you up at night, which is probably one of the reasons why there's a decrease in your immune system, an increase in your blood pressure, there's anxiety and depression. Unforgiveness binds you up, enchains us up to ourselves and to the person that we are not forgiving. And as long as you hold on to that pain, as long as it remains unaddressed, unnamed, unspoken, we remain connected, chained, bound to the person who has done us wrong. There are things we can do when we can't, there are things that we do when we can't seem to manage the psychological and emotional issues that we have, like holding on. And often those are addictive and have long-term, more damaging consequences. which is why making amends is one of the 12 steps. Wherever and whenever it is safe and possible and won't make things worse for the other person. And so is forgiving. Those physical consequences of unforgiveness are lessened and relieved when we forgive. And it is never too late to forgive. Even if the person is gone far away long ago, or they have died, forgiving is as much about setting yourself free as it is about setting them free. And it starts with empathy. There is a generation of young people who have had enough therapy to love their parents very, very much and to see all of the ways that their parents failed them. And empathy lets us realize that they did the best they could with what they knew, with what was available to them. And we can share that with ourselves, setting ourselves free with empathy and forgiveness, that we did the best we could to get through a situation with the resources that we had. Empathy, compassion, forgiveness, and then an invitation to follow Christ, even if it isn't an invitation back into our lives. And Jesus reinforces that story, reinforces this truth with a parable. Now, lest we forget, a parable tells the truth about the world. It is not a one-to-one correlation about who God is, because it takes a turn at the end. And let's just let that piece go. The first debtor is approached by the king. He needs to pay back his debts. It's 1,000 talents, which each talent is equal to 15 to 20 years' wages. And someone did the math. That's about $7 billion. I'm not sure if the hearers of this story would have laughed or if they would have been shocked and gasped. I have questions. Why did he need that size of a loan? Where did the money go? I've recently had to take out a loan. Did the king do an income to debt analysis to figure out if he could ever pay it back? Why would the king do this if he knew it would take lifetimes to pay it back? The first debtor asked the king for patience and some time, like time was going to make a difference. But the king was moved with compassion and empathy for this man who was literally drowning in debt, taking his whole family with him, and the king writes it off. $7 billion worth of debt gone. Imagine the joy and the celebration in that relief. Imagine the bonds being released, the chains being dropped, the freedom and found in that forgiveness. But it turns out he wasn't all free. He had held on to some bitterness, some anger. He had fed it and watched it grow. And then he saw the man who owed him 100 denarii. A denarii is a day's wage, so less than a year's labor. And the man who had been forgiven lifetimes of debt lashed out in vengeance and anger and violence. The unforgiveness, the bitterness, this anger he was holding on to resulted in the most irrational response possible of throwing the man in prison where he couldn't pay back a paybackable debt. He would get nothing. And the king was told what had happened. And he had the first man, the man for whom he had forgiven so much, thrown in prison. The man who'd been forgiven much's lack of empathy and for compassion and forgiveness, his commitment to anger and bitterness and violence had chained the man, had bound him to the second man and had bound him within himself. It kept him from the fullness of life, the freedom that he had just found. It was his unforgiveness that was the prison. And he had made it for himself, bound himself in it, wrapped himself in those chains. Living in forgiveness loosens the bonds we have, bonds on ourselves, and loosens the bonds we have on others, so that all of us might have the opportunity to live in freedom and to have a whole and abundant living. Forgiveness loosens the chains that bind us, giving us all an opportunity of kingdom living in this world today. The kind of living where there is empathy and kindness and compassion for everyone. So, beloveds, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Do you feel a chain? Does it go all the way back to your drive here this morning? Or maybe to your childhood? Feel its bonds and feel where you have fed it. Maybe you can look at that other person, that moment, with just a bit of empathy. Maybe you can look at yourself with empathy. Offer yourself grace. Maybe you needed to have this chain to keep yourself safe for a little while. Take a breath. Are you ready to put it down? To let go of that bitterness and anger and forgive? Maybe not yet. Maybe you can just loosen your grip on it a little and see how that feels. Take a breath. Amen. Beloved community, will you stand as you are able in body or in heart?